could be described as a working person.
Having a job, yes. It's not quite going to work, that distinction, I don't think. But you never know. If tofu-eating wokerati can reach a constituency of voters, then perhaps this nonsense can as well.
But Liz Truss, of course, trying to draw the line against the people that the Tories are fighting, and making that about Labour, rather than, of course, the anti-growth coalition has somewhat disappeared. So, given the new stance of the government, so her previous lines of division don't necessarily work anymore.
We talked earlier about the mixture of bafflement and pity that many people outside the United Kingdom feel about the state of our nation. I've made some strange friends on Twitter over the years.
Who's your new one?
Well, he's not a new one. He gets in touch with me occasionally. He's the Director for Land Transport on the EU Commission, a former EU ambassador to Myanmar and Uganda. Christian Schmidt, who's just been in touch to say, ooh, this is in response to the tofu-eating wokerati comments from our Don't Laugh Home Secretary. He's been in touch to say, ooh, as a Brussels-based unelected EU cyclist who reads the occasional Guardian article, I was reassured by the tofu-eating part. I really do not like tofu at all, so I hope it'll get me off the blacklist.
Right.
That's how quite senior foreign politicians are commenting upon British politics at the moment.
Yeah.
It's great, isn't it? Take some calls, I think, shall we, after the news, after the headlines with Lottie Morley.
Truss is facing MPs in her first Prime Minister's question since being forced to ditch her flagship tax cuts from the mini-budget. The Prime Minister told MPs she's made mistakes but is getting on with the job. She's also assured MPs she will protect the triple lock on pensions after speculation the pledge would be dropped. A damning report into maternity care at hospitals in East Kent has found up to 45 babies would have survived if they received proper care. The independent inquiry looked into more than 200 cases since 2009 at 2 hospitals in Margate and Ashford. And the Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has been granted bail after a private court hearing. He'd been in custody after he was charged at the weekend with attempted rape, assault and controlling and coercive behaviour. LBC weather, showery rain with thunderstorms possible in Northern Ireland, Wales and southern, western and central England. Drier and brighter further north and east. Windy in the west with a high of 19 degrees.
LBC.
Calling all landlords and developers. Is your residential building empty? Maybe it's half full. Introducing FineFair, the rent guarantee company. FineFair will guarantee your rent for 1 to 5 years with no commission or management fees. Join thousands of owners already guaranteeing their rent through FineFair. For more information, call FineFair on 0208 554 0500 or visit us at finefair.com. Subject to acceptance, terms apply.
I'm Julius Caesar, an emperor, not a tradesperson. But if I was, I'd be on Checkatrade. 8 out of 10 homeowners surveyed would choose a tradesperson from Checkatrade over one that isn't. And they guarantee your work for a year. So apply today. Checkatrade.com. Up to £1,000, T's and C's apply.
Life is about sharing those magical moments, and food shouldn't be any different. For over 35 years, Marouche has been perfecting this experience with their delicious food, warm hospitality and live entertainment. Authentic Lebanese cuisine made the traditional way. Marouche, your family restaurant. Book now at marouche.com.
Everything is more exciting when it's electrified. And now the Nissan Electrified lineup is here. Whether you're a you'll find a Nissan to match your feeling. Search Nissan Feel Electrified and book your personalised test drive with the experts in electrification. Join us at the Feel Electrified event between October 8th and November 8th at your local Nissan dealership. Test drive subject to availability.
Hear that? That's what nothing sounds like, which is exactly what you'll pay for BT Broadband until 2023. It also sounds like... and just about anything else you want to do with your broadband. And then it's just $28.99 a month for month 4. And there's no setup fee either. BT Broadband. Free till 2023. Now that really does sound good, doesn't it? Hurry. Offer ends 3rd of November. New customers 24-month contract. CPI plus 3.9% each March. Terms apply.
At Laser Clinics UK, we're bringing you the future of beauty. We offer state-of-the-art laser hair removal for every skin tone and type. Ditch the razor, leave behind painful, pricey waxing, make the switch for long-lasting, smooth results. Our Big Beauty sale is on now. 50% off all laser hair removal packages. Brazilian and underarms only £24.50 per session. Go to laserclinics.co.uk for T's and C's and to book and buy online. Laser Clinics UK.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:35 is the time. It's almost impossible to do political analysis at the moment. Because, as Keir Starmer pointed out, what is the point of a Prime Minister whose promises don't even last a week? So we could spend 10 minutes picking over the bones of... In fact, we did spend 10 minutes picking over the bones of PMQs, and then Liz Truss had come along and changed the bones. And so the time we'd spent picking over the last ones would have been rendered largely redundant. I'd like to hear some different voices. I've asked Theo to stay with us so that we can both field your calls. And get in quick on this one, 0345 6060973. I should ask you some specific questions, but you are welcome just to respond generally or broadly to what you've just heard. I don't know that I've ever witnessed a PMQs quite like that. Truss is clearly not going to let the light in. She is going to do what we suggested yesterday, which is a combination of cosplay and karaoke, really, and catchphrases. She's cosplaying Margaret Thatcher very much with it was actually Peter Mandelson who said, "I'm a fighter, not a quitter," but in Truss's mind it would be a sort of Thatcherite flex. And then the catchphrase is not really kicking in, but she did use the word deliver several times. You know, and if you're still sort of persuaded by his act, you'd know that Boris Johnson, you'd have to agree with me here, whether you're persuaded by his fraudulent act or not. Boris Johnson would be trying to claim amazing victories where there weren't any, and the backbenchers then have something to cheer. I think Theo was right to pick up on the absence of cheers, because Johnson would inflate these ludicrous balloons of nonsense, but they were enormous balloons. They would pop, of course, in the first moment of exposure to the bright light of day, but in the context of PMQs, he'd inflate these enormous balloons of bloviation, and that means that people who are a bit hard of thinking, like Jonathan Gullis, could cheer them to the rafters. Truss lacks the lung power to inflate enormous balloons of nonsense, and so there was nothing really for the backbenchers to cheer. She just keeps repeating, rather ridiculously, the boast that they had brought in a cap on energy unit costs, which Labour brought in as well. And last week she was criticising Labour for having a 6-month limit currently on their proposals, and this week she's there having acknowledged and indeed adapted that policy for her own party with her new Chancellor. So the stuff she was criticising Labour for last week, they are now doing. I thought Starmer could perhaps have made a little bit more of that. So 0345 6060973 is the number you need for your post-mortem analysis, your post-match analysis, as it were. What did you make of it all? The question I think we should ask, because we haven't asked it yet today, is can you see any way back for her? I'll speak to Stephen in Leicester, then I'll ask Theo that question. Really, with her own MPs now failing really to support her in any way that remotely resembles lustily, I can't see her surviving. 0345 6060973. And as ever, when we do these sorts of conversations, Conservative voters, Conservative members, particularly welcome, because at some point we are going to have to all start pulling together to get the country out of the hole. It's just a question of how long it's going to take for some Brexit supporters to admit that we're in a hole that they dug in the first place. 12:38 is the time. Let's go to Leicester. Stephen is there. Stephen, what would you like to say?
James, first-time caller.
Welcome.
And fairly new to LBC, a few months.
Excellent. Welcome aboard. Better late than never.
Yeah, thank you. I was just listening to PMQs, and we have board meetings weekly to look ahead. And if anybody behaved in the way they behave, they'd be out. They'd be out instantly, screaming, shouting over each other. We're in a crisis. We need answers. We need people to make decisions. And all we're doing is scoring points.
Yeah, I take your point. I mean, PMQs isn't really the area where...
No,
but the message it sends...
We often... It's serious at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think now is not... I mean, I suppose if I were a Conservative backbencher desperately trying to spin some good out of this, I'd say, well, Stephen, I think you'll find it was the Labour Party making all the noise this week. We were sitting there quietly, somberly reflecting upon the state of the nation, albeit that our Prime Minister is almost single-handedly responsible for it.
I think it's as bad on both sides. At the end of the day, we are in a crisis. They're all point scoring, and we need some answers, and we need people to make some decisions.
I mean, I disagree with you a little bit about the equal culpability. As I just pointed out, Liz Truss last week was attacking Keir Starmer.
Conservatives can't scream, can they, because they're in a bad place.
Well, exactly that. And she was attacking Starmer for a policy that she's now nicked. So I think Labour are entitled to a little bit more leeway than the Tories. What questions do you want answered? And it might be a silly question, but I'm interested to hear your answer.
I want to know what help there is. I mean, I've had to shut 2 businesses down in the last 2 years.
Right, gosh.
Through expenses that we just can't afford. And I've got a firm now, 30 years old, we're teetering on collapsing.
Wow.
You know, I've got 16 lads. We're not a big firm, but we've been going a long, long time with a good reputation.
Yeah.
And all of this is just crippling us. The costs, the extra costs, everything going up. And, you know, we were in a good place 2 years ago.
Even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
What if there is no help?
Even during COVID.
What if there is no help?
We're gone. I can see 3 months.
Really?
3-4 months.
And this is because what's going out has increased while what's going in has not.
Everything's going out has increased, but we can't put the bills up. We can't put the costs onto our clients. And, you know, to lose a business after 30-odd years.
No, you've sobered me up there, actually, because, I mean, I don't know how much you heard of us speaking to people earlier who are actually hungry and reports on the individual experience of... And
I'm going to be putting guys in this situation. Families who I know, who are friends, who have been with me 20-odd years. And then I've got to go to them and say, you know, sorry.
We've run out of road.
Yeah.
We've run out of road.
And then I sit and listen to this, and I just think, what's the point?
You're not persuaded that it's all the fault of the tofu-eating wokerati, Stephen?
Well, it could be, but,
So who knows? Down with that sort of
thing. You know, it's one of them, mate. We are in a financial struggle, all of us, some worse than others, but, you know, I might have to be on the edge of putting 16 people out of work, and I've got to look them in the eye.
There's no silver lining or light-hearted response to that. Stephen, thank you. And I mean that. I actually felt like a cold shower when you sort of reflect upon what that would be like. Talk a lot about empathy. Normally you imagine people in a less privileged situation than you're in, but Stephen, a boss, an employer, 30 years on the clock, and actually contemplating having to tell people that that's it, they've run out of road. And that must be odd, Theo, actually, sort of listening to PM. We forget, because we're so close to the action, that politics is not a game, and that is what people like Stephen want to hear, is some form of light being illuminated at the end of the tunnel that they currently find themselves in.
It does feel, certainly for the last 3 or 4 days, since the weekend, that the Conservative Party itself is in complete disarray. There's a split right down the middle of the Conservative Party about ideology, where they think they should go at this particular point in time. And so Stephen, I'd imagine, listening there, would actually like to hear some order, would like to hear somebody who has a grip of the situation, who is going to make the decisions that's going to help him protect his business. But at the moment, that isn't going to happen, because the Conservative Party can't sort themselves out. And until they're able to put personal differences to one side, and Tory MPs who I know have been speaking to me about this particular conundrum, with individuals putting aside their own ambitions, whether that's Boris Johnson or whether that's Rishi Sunak, and actually saying, well, is there somebody who we could actually put in charge to make this situation bearable? At the moment, the only person they've got is Jeremy Hunt, who's in this sort of quasi-boss-like role of the government. But he's the Chancellor. But it was interesting when Liz Truss answered the question about the pensions triple lock. She said the Chancellor was fully committed.
But he wasn't on Monday.
But he wasn't on Monday.
I mean, they've made one of their little posters.
Yeah.
You showed me. They've made a little poster saying triple lock. I mean, could that be the next U-turn? Where is Hunt going to find any money?
So, well, then we go back to the universal credit.
Benefits.
Go back to universal credit. Of course, that at the Conservative Party conference when they rode back on the 45p top rate of tax, that was the next big battle to be fought. But Jeremy Hunt hasn't just U-turned on the mini budget, he's gone in actually the opposite direction. If you take September the 22nd as ground zero when it comes to the UK's finances, and Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng took it to -10, actually Jeremy Hunt's gone back in the other direction in terms of the constraints which are being placed when it comes to public spending and fiscal policy. Tax policy.
I mean, more of your thoughts, more calls coming up after this. But I can't do this. It's too, I don't know, unprofessional really. But what does the end look like? It's hard to say.
The end looks like Conservative MPs in the next, whether it's be the next 24 hours, 48 hours, or next
2
week,
hours.
2 hours.
Could be this fracking vote, couldn't it?
Figuring out somebody that they can all
but
get
is there a
behind
chance that they won't? I mean, could she last till Christmas?
Yes.
Yes.
She could. There's a chance.
Do you think the likelihood of her lasting till Christmas has gone up or down since Monday morning?
I think it's gone down since Monday morning. But if you're asking me off the back of that PMQs, I think it's gone slightly up.
Do you?
I think it wasn't. It was. It could have been so. Well, look, if you compare Liz Truss when she did that media round, the press conference, when you compare Liz Truss, local radio, what happened at the Conservative Party conference, that was marginally better than previous poor performances.
PMQ suits her a little bit better because you're not having someone bite straight back by saying what you're talking about.
Yeah,
as those BBC journalists did so brilliantly, and in the press conference, really, she had nowhere to turn, did she? And she had no one behind her, so the energy is very different.
But make no mistake, once they've figured it out, she's gone. The premiership is over. She's not in charge anymore. Jeremy Hunt's in charge at the moment.
This is Michael Gove this morning saying it's when, not if.
Exactly. There comes a tipping point where Conservative MPs come to a decision that actually she can no longer run the country. That decision has happened. It's just a question of finding the replacement.
And the ministers touring the studios insisting that everything's going to be just fine are just watching whatever shreds of dignity they have left disappearing down the plug hole of posterity.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:51 is the time. A little bit of PMQ's post-match analysis. Let's go to Guildford. Keith is there. Keith, what would you like to say?
Good morning. I watched Question Time, if you want to call it that. It's like a bear pit, but anyway.
But it always is. I don't know that the raucousness is. I mean, it's always interesting, but it's not particularly relevant because that's the bit that happens every week, isn't it?
It doesn't help. But in answer to your question, yes, she needs to go. She's not in control. Jeremy Hunt is posturing. He knows what he's doing. He's slimy. He's slippery. That's just my opinion. What we're all seeing.
Say what you think.
There is something wrong with this country. I'm on strike at the moment, but I'm on sick, whatever.
Okay.
I work for Royal Mail, right? So she's criticising working. She said militant unions. This shows how untouchable she is, or she's just out of touch. She's calling union members militant. They have to go through the process to have a ballot. They need
a much bigger mandate than she's got to take industrial action, don't they?
But the point,
it's a good
point we're all missing is that CEOs in this country are getting massive bonuses. They're getting free shares. We've got nurses and midwives and police officers going to food banks.
Yes,
we've got
and we've also got an original intention, of course, to give more money to the people earning over 150 grand a year than they were giving to anybody else. I mean, it's not a coincidence or an accident.
They've always looked after the rich. Always looked after the rich. People need to wake up and smell the bacon. Yeah, Labour are not. Okay.
It's normally coffee, isn't it?
Smell the coffee.
Yeah,
then.
No, bacon's fine. I'm just worried about the vegetarians. They'll be asleep forever.
People need to wake up to the fact that Labour are in waiting. Labour are not going to be perfect, but we need a change. We can't keep whipping people. Monday, the triple lock wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, today, because she's under pressure.
I think Craig David wrote the script for this one, didn't he? It was so. Met a Chancellor on Monday. He said he can't commit to the triple lock. Met number 10 on Tuesday. They said it was under review. Met James Cleverly on Wednesday. He said he can't offer certainty. Met Liz Truss Wednesday lunchtime, and she's been clear that we will maintain the triple lock. Her and the Chancellor are both committed to it. We're chilled on Thursday.
Anyway, the last thing you're probably going to let me say is, this saying, the last thing because you're not going to let me talk much longer, it's like living hand to mouth, isn't it? Well, we've got government living hand to mouth.
It's a great point. Not even that. It's moving according to the wind. I mean, who knows what they're going to be committing to and then uncommitting to, or U-turning on, or pledging and unpledging next. Theo Ushwood's come back into the studio. Has there been another U-turn?
Well, not quite. But
No.
Of course, we mentioned about, whether they would link benefits, universal credit, to inflation.
Yes, because if they don't, then the poorest people in the country are receiving a cut to their income.
Okay, so the pensions triple look is protected. We heard that from Liz Truss there. Question about whether from Basildon and Billericay MP John Barron, Conservative backbencher, senior, well regarded, about whether the Prime Minister would do the same when it comes to universal credit. Those in work.
May I encourage the Prime Minister to ensure that we retain compassion in politics and these decisions, including maintaining the link between benefits and inflation. Will she do that? Prime Minister.
We are compassionate Conservatives. We will always work to protect the most vulnerable, and that is what we did with the energy price guarantee. We are going to make sure the most vulnerable are protected into year 2.
No commitment there from Liz Truss to link.
What happens in September determines what happens next April. So if inflation is 10.1% in September, there should be a 10.1% increase in universal credit come next April. This year they got 3% because last September inflation was about 3%. So they're living in a world where costs have gone up by 10% and their income has gone up by 3%.
But Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak in April made the commitment that from next April that they would put universal credit up in line with inflation.
Was that a manifesto pledge?
I don't know if it was a manifesto. I don't know. Yes, it was. Sorry, yes, it was a manifesto pledge. But the point is that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng wanted to go back on that. There is significant opposition to that move on the Conservative backbenches, particularly in those marginal seats where, and of course, 40% of those on universal credit are actually in work. James, so it doesn't, because it's the system actually set up by the Conservative government, by Ian Duncan Smith of all people, actually helps those in work as well as those out of work. So the strivers versus
helps employers paying pittances more than it helps anybody, really. But there we are.
But
I hear you. So we mentioned earlier that I'm slightly uncomfortable pointing that out because it makes it sound like the people who aren't in work don't deserve any help. But of course they're going to be even poorer than the people who are in work. Big shout to everyone who picked up on the comment there about waking up and smell the bacon. That, of course, has been replaced now. It's no longer wake up and smell the coffee. It's wake up and smell the tofu. That's how you decide whether or not you are paying attention or not. Should we squeeze in Jamie in Church Stretton with the last word of the day? I think we should. Jamie, what's it going to be?
Thank you, James. I saw PMQs. I don't know why I do it, but it always,
penance, Jamie.
Ends up with me feeling really angry about stuff.
Fair enough.
And to be honest, I'll disagree with you about this is the way it goes. I watched the ITN news with a woman who can't even make toast in the morning.
We had that on earlier, actually.
Night.
I think you.
Yeah. And
Liz.
I almost wept at that particular report.
Yes.
And I think that what the House of Commons, if it had any sense about itself, would have done would have been to have heard PMQs in total silence.
Gosh.
And I think the Labour Party actually missed a trick if that's the game they want to play. I think we are in such a serious situation that it does nobody any good to see our elected people engaging in that sort of rah-rah stuff.
Yeah.
Behind her, the Conservatives were just there because they'd been told to turn up.
They looked
a
bit shell-shocked. They looked a bit shell-shocked.
There they were.
Yeah.
And she did her usual, came out fighting, threw a few red herrings about the rail strikes and such like. But if that had been received in total silence by the opposition, then the echoes of her voice would, I think, have been a lot more impressive to everybody.
That's 2 or 3 people who have commented upon how today would have been a good day to reject normal service at PMQs, particularly with a cowed Conservative Party. For the Labour Party to behave with real sombre seriousness would maybe, I think I'm probably going to agree with you, actually, despite the fact you thought that you were disagreeing with me. I think you make perfect sense. It's probably too big an oil tanker to turn around, But it might have been nice to try. Thank you, Jamie. I hope your anger dissipates as the afternoon unfolds. Whatever you do, don't have a look at the story about what's happening at Dover, where Brexit warnings, or rather Project Fear warnings, about the smuggling of uneatable food and other various disgusting products that would follow our departure from the single market are coming horribly true, with 21 out of 22 inspected lorries carrying meat being found to contain illegal products, maggot-infested meat, and sundry other delights. I thought I'd leave you with that as you approach lunchtime. And Sheila Fogarty takes up the baton, 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 takes up the baton,